All right, welcome everyone to our first Keep Lounge chat. This series will feature discussions with artists, artisans, and scholars on a range of topics related to Bermuda history, art, and culture. And I'm joined today by Bermudian artist Graham Foster and NMB Director of Learning and Engagement, Lisa Howie. And today we're going to be discussing Graham's mural, The Hall of History, which is on display at Commissioner's House. And was opened in 2009 by Her Majesty the Queen, I believe. So first off, just to check in, how you guys doing? How you making out?
Hey, fantastic. How you guys all doing out there? Hopefully the quarantine ain't getting you down too much, but sweet freedom's around the corner.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it's also a reminder too, we talk about art, right? Like the power of art.
Mm-hmm,
It's a place to sort of tuck in and meditate with, to find some respite from the world. I know some creators are struggling making right now. Others are proliferating, and others are just sitting in with it and having a nice time sitting again and looking with their artwork. So yeah, hopefully today is like an opportunity to uplift a little bit.
Yeah.
Celebrating one of our most talented artists.
For sure, yeah.
Thanks a lot, guys. I guess it's, there's all different varying degrees of stress that people are going through right now. So some artists, I guess that can create some kind of an artist block and kind of shut them down, and they're probably focusing on other things, waiting for the inspiration to strike once again. But some artists can kind of channel stress into a kind of maelstrom of creative activity. So it's all it'll be very interesting to see after all this is done and dusted about what kind of creations artists make after all this, and how they're actually what kind of imagery they focus on.
Yeah, it's interesting actually. We've launched United Together, which is a project aimed at documenting people's experiences during this lockdown, and we've had quite a few paintings submitted, as well as poetry. So yeah, I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on the role of art as historic document, and have you been inspired to create anything to reflect this particular time period? I mean, how's it impacting you as an artist?
Well, as I was saying earlier, being a full-time artist, I'm pretty much on a quasi kind of quarantine most of the year anyway. So I try to get in, like, if I can, like 8 hours a day, pretty much of painting. So life hasn't changed too much for me. I've been lucky in that I've got a couple of large scale commissions on right now, so I'm just trying to work through those at the moment. I was thinking the other day, say if I didn't have any work on and I could just purely work on my own things, what kind of ideas and inspiration might kind of percolate to the surface due to this, the world being turned upside down at the moment. And I'm not. Yeah, I guess every artist approached it in different ways. I guess maybe if I kind of searched my subconscious, I would, because I paint mainly from my imagination. So possibly some, there could, and sometimes it tends to be a little more on the dark side, on the slightly more macabre side. So I was wondering what I would actually come up with, but I think when you look back, apparently a lot of artists didn't paint. They weren't too inspired by the previous Spanish flu from 100 years ago, because there were some great German expressionist painters at the time, and there were some absolutely brilliant artists, but they tended to focus on World War One. I was wondering about that the other day, because it's quite difficult to paint something that's virus related. I mean, I guess some people are doing crazy abstracts of the coronavirus, with all the little tendrils coming off it and whatever. But so when you look back 100 years ago, they had World War One to focus on, which was just the explosions and the carnage and the craziness of the trenches. So I think visually there was just a lot more going on, a lot more things you could grab inspiration from, and they were obviously much more traumatized. Some of the artists coming back from the front, so I guess it was kind of cathartic for them to dig deep into their soul and try to kind of erase the post-traumatic stress that they had from that experience. So that was one way of exercising the demons in some ways.
Yeah, very true. And I think as an archaeologist and a historian, we definitely rely very heavily on art as a means of understanding the past and a means of understanding the people and their experiences of the past. So I think you're right with that First World War comparison. I mean, it was so catastrophic to everyone who it affected. So I think a lot of the art that you see, you know, Guernica,
That's what I was going to
with
bring up.
Picasso and things like that.
Yeah, that's
You
one
know,
of the ultimate. Yeah.
exactly.
It's almost like too, though, that the post-traumatic stress of the situation lends to different movements, right? So that
for sure.
I think what we'll see are ripple effects that probably can't be
Oh.
gauged or even languaged until we see them fully articulated in the bodies of work or the generations of work that come out of it.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about what
Yeah.
happened post World War movements of artwork and automation and futurism and all of these kind of insurgencies related to technological change. And now we're looking at something where we've had the first time perhaps in the history of our humanity where there's been one particular situation that's infected the entire world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a forced worldwide
Yeah.
sabbatical. I mean, what is it, like 3 billion people under lockdown? I mean, or almost half the world's population.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
totally unprecedented. So maybe there will be this massive flood of creativity that
Mm-hmm.
we can't really see right now. But once things do get back to normal in 3 months, 6 months, whatever it's going to be, then we might see some very interesting directions that
Mm-hmm.
people have taken.
For sure.
But,
Yeah.
we'll see what happens.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess watch this space really to see what comes out of all of this.
Yeah, well, but nobody knows. But I thought it was interesting the other day. I think Germany is going to be one of the first countries to start slowly opening up, and one of the first things they're going to do is open up their art museums.
That's
So I think
interesting,
people do turn to these institutions to just kind of they look upon them as almost kind of meditative sanctuaries. You can
Yes,
walk
sure,
in and
yeah.
just lose yourself in a painting and forget about all the issues that you've been going through on a personal level up to that point.
Well, I do like that. Lose yourself in a painting. I love that as a segue to the Hall of History now, because
Yeah.
I've had it like described to me, and I've certainly used it because I love the description, as like a Where's Waldo of Bermuda history. I mean, the amount of detail in it is, I mean, it's borderline insane how much detail that you managed to put in there. And I know a lot of people love the whole of history as kind of a visual entry point into understanding Bermuda history a bit more, which I think was kind of your goal with it. You know, I've looked at some of your videos and spoken to you before about it. But there is just so much in the painting. I was just wondering, like, how did you do your research and how did you decide what to include in the painting? I think I'll see if I can bring up one of the visuals to kind of just show how much is in there. I don't know if you guys can see that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, I did get a little masochistic with the detail, but I figured I figured this would probably be my first and last mural, because when I initially walked into the room, I saw this 1,000 square feet of whiteness kind of staring back at me.
Mm-hmm.
That was a truly scary moment, because I knew that every sculpture, every painting I'd done up to that moment would be kind of out of the window, and I'd be known as the mural guy. So the pressure was really on. But now I'm pushing a half century. I look back on doing that in my 30s. I think that really was a young man's game, because the amount of just standing and hours and hours and hours. It was 7,000 hours altogether. And the last year got really crazy because the Queen was coming, so I had to speed up. So it's basically I'd start work at 7 a.m, 20-minute lunch break, and then I'd work right through to 11 o'clock at night. Get home around 11:30, have dinner at 11:30 at night, and then get up at 6 again the next morning, and it would start all over again. And I look back on that, I think, geez, at my advanced years now, I don't know if I could be doing that. But
Right.
But the crazy thing about Bermuda history is it's like a rabbit hole. You know, I mean, I could literally do 10 murals on everything, 10 murals that size on all the things that I've missed out or that I could expand upon them. I could do a whole wall on shipbuilding. I could do a whole wall on the early transportation. I could do a whole wall on sailing, a whole wall on shipbuilding. It just goes on and on and on. So I basically kind of just scratched the surface by reading basically as many books on Bermuda history that I could get a hold of. And then I'd have a sketchbook with me, and I'd kind of write down anything that I thought would translate well visually from the text. And then from what I'd written down, I would then start doing that sketches of the actual visuals. And it was actually thanks to the internet. That's what made things so much easier. So if I needed a certain type, anything from a ear of corn or Iroquois Indian or a certain type of steamship, I could turn to the internet and print that out. So that actually made some of the more technical aspects of the mural a lot easier. But the main issue was scale, proportion, and perspective, because the mural actually drops from 8 feet down to 20 feet deep, as opposed to being a rectangle. So most murals will be like maybe 10 feet high by 50 feet long. So you're just dealing with that one strip. But when you're dealing with a staircase that drops 2 stories, there's a lot more challenges. So what the tricky thing was finding a continuation, kind of a kind of sinuous kind of continuity throughout all the historical events. So I didn't want your eye to stop at any one thing. I just wanted it to have a flow going straight through from the wreck of the Sea Venture in 1609 all the way up to the PLP win in 1998. So
those are two major lines of decision making, though, Graham. Like, you're doing the research yourself, you're filtering that to develop a meta narrative, and then along the way, then you're also like selecting and figuring out how to do the imagery. Like, that sinuosity is very clear when you're able to see the whole work as it moves around the room. And then, as you had told me before too, that when you get to sort of the final wall where the airplane's at the top, and it starts to almost kind of zigzag down through the pillars, there's just so many layers of decisions I feel that have gone into it that are so commendable. Because the situation itself, so the situation's tricky unto itself, and then like the way in which you percolated the history to draw down these important elements that really does craft a storyboard that doesn't have any blanks at all, right? We're not missing gaps of our history in any point. It's more like, you know, the desire to be able to get closer, because the ceiling is so high and the dimensions of the space are relatively awkward. So it's almost like you've left us now the living challenge of how do we get, I want to be in there. We all want to get closer to it. So this virtual wall that's been created, or whatever this technology that these guys have to help us to see it clearly, I think it's going to be a real win for us all.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. I hadn't actually heard of that, the virtual wall.
Well, it's like I don't know, Deb, can you just explain it? Someone has been able to film it so we can now see it in its full rotundity.
Yeah.
Oh, great. So when you go online and you can just scan across it?
Yeah, you can pretty much, it's basically a 360 panoramic of the Hall of History. So you can scan the whole room. I think you can zoom in on certain sections that are within the frame and things like that. So yeah, it's been a great, I think technology just really helps us kind of share your work with so many different people. So I know a lot of people have loved seeing their favorite mural, even though they're stuck at home. So that was a great win for us to be able to get that tech and
that's awesome. Brilliant.
Yeah.
But it's but looking back, how long has it been now? It's been so I finished in 2000. I started in 2005, finished in 2009. So looking at about a decade has passed since I finished the mural, and I don't go back to it too often. Every now and again, go there, give a talk or whatever. But when I do go back, I kind of look at areas. I go, I could have tightened up a bit there, could have done this a bit differently. But I always forget that when you're doing murals at the time, it's all about speed as well. You can't get bogged down in any one particular detail, because when you've got 1,000 square feet to cover, you can't be lingering lovingly on 1 square foot.
But there's a big difference between your sketches. Your sketches, the model shows that you weren't necessarily going to go into, because you're in the square inch detail with fine brush. Whereas your initial model that I saw was almost a lot more, not abstract, but it was, the space was a bit, or your your level of detail was different. And then I feel like when you got to the actual painting, you put so much more in than your model possibly could have even achieved. I don't know, did that start to happen on its own?
That was before we knew we had the financial backing to do it. So I didn't want to get into too much detail with the, I didn't want to spend a couple of months doing super detailed sketches if it possibly wasn't going to go ahead.
Okay.
So that image you showed, that was the very very first initial sketch of the whole room, and then from that I probably did about another 5 different versions. So continuing, kind of fine tuning it, and so eventually I came up with some sketches that I was a series that I was happy enough with that I could grid up. So I grid them to 1-inch scale. Yeah, so there, all the big elements are there. So in the water, all the blue areas in the mural are full of coral and fish and lots of different things going on. So here you can see I've just given a suggestion of what's going to be there, and then obviously when you're dealing with, so the full size wall of this is probably like 200 square feet, something like that. So once you start hitting those kind of scales, you can really get into the detail. And like I said, I figured this would be the first and last time I'd be doing a project like this, so I decided to go all out on the detail.
I think that's
so there you go. You can see
see
the difference. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So even with the water, I like when I paint water, I like it to be almost like you're wearing a mask and you're looking through the water and seeing what's on the bottom. So you're seeing like buried treasure or fish or different types of reef systems, that type of thing, or scuba divers, snorkelers. So I don't like to leave an area of blue. And I do that in pretty much all the paintings, even regular, if I'm painting someone's Bermuda house with water in front of it, I like to put in eagle rays and snappers and moray eels and the occasional denizen of the deep, usually throwing a shark, just to make it a little more interesting.
Well, that first section of the mural is fascinating. You see people when they walk into the space, the rooms, the wall straight ahead is with the shipwreck, and then you have captured the mystique of the Isle of Devils with these creatures, these otherworldly underwater creatures, and that's always a very fascinating starting point as we begin to talk about how Bermuda begins to be founded. Not discovered, but this is of course the Sea Venture wreck that leads to 1 year later the proper colonization of Bermuda.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there were so many different ways of doing that initial. That's such a that imagery of that initial wreck is quite powerful. So there's a lot of different ways that I could have approached it. Mm-hmm. So I figured, for that wall, which is a bit smaller, having the main element of being the sea venture front and center, and then having this kind of maelstrom of sea creatures kind of descending underneath the wreck.
One of the things, because it ties in with our talking about the united together in the context of now, one of the things that I see as I go back through your mural and I think about where we are at today is that although we were divided racially and economically for many centuries of our existence, that there's always a thread, though, of people working together. And that even though we have hardships, you don't hide or veil the situation in terms of racism and enslavement and treatments of torture. It's that at the same time, though, there's a more overwhelming feeling of unification. And I think there's two things that happen with it, both in the way you shape the narrative and then stylistically how you render the language of that narrative.
Well, I remember when I was doing the research for the mural, there was a story about when all the most of the young able men would go out on the high seas, and that would include slaves as well, mm-hmm. and white Bermudians. And apparently, when they were on the ships, there was no pecking order at all. There'd be the captain, but the whole crew, there'd be everybody was viewed as equal on the high seas. And then when they got back to Bermuda, of course, the slaves are to know their place, and white Bermudians would be on another level. But I didn't want, one thing I didn't want to do was, because I know Bermuda's history's been very anglicized, and so what I didn't want to do was well, a lot of Black Bermudian history's kind of been swept under the rug, and Portuguese history. So I wanted to make sure that that everybody had a fair shake as far as their history went. So whatever person views the mural, there's something about their own history that they can latch onto and take away or get inspired by, or possibly research further.
Yes.
For sure, yeah. So I think I'm going to go back to that 17th century, I think, panel, that first wall that you kind of come into. And you mentioned that there, the stuff that you didn't include, you could fill another 10 murals of the same size. It's interesting because I know Elena shared a story with me about how after the mural had been completely photographed, you came across a story about, I guess it was 17th century beekeeping in Bermuda. And you really wanted to go back in and paint in like little bees. And I think you managed to sneak in and paint in a couple hives. And Elena kind of keeps looking at it and goes, "Ugh, Graham." But I mean, did you ever run into a painting block while you were painting, or was there just so much material to work from that it was almost too much choice?
Oh, I was really lucky. No blocks. It was just such a huge amount of work to get out of the way that what really helped me was that I had everything in miniature, so I knew pretty much what I wanted to paint.
Awesome.
And like I said, thanks to the internet, I had all that source material at hand. Because you think like 30, 40 years ago, I would have been trolling through the library, looking through Encyclopedia Britannicas. Getting imagery would have been such an issue. So any muralists today, I mean, they just must thank their lucky stars that we have Google. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah.
How are we doing for time?
We got a few more minutes, I think, for time. I do have a couple questions that were submitted to us. One was, what was the most difficult thing to paint?
That's the first time I've ever been asked that. That's
really okay.
That's really interesting. I was trying to think about that, and like I said, if you can access the imagery and like I said, print it off and have the ship or whatever it is beside you and paint from that, it makes it a lot easier. But probably one thing, when I was painting like crowds of people, I tend to keep, especially the male faces, I tend to keep painting my own face. And I did it again. I painted myself again, because subconsciously, so the guy had the same nose as me, or he'd have the slopey eyes, and I'd actually never painted Black people before. So okay. I'm not a portrait artist or anything like that. I don't, so that was probably one of the biggest challenges, doing a crowd of people of different skin colors, lighter colored people, darker colored people, and keeping their faces different and more interesting. So some of the faces are a little more rough and ready than others. But then again, you can't get sucked into doing every little wrinkle and detail and gleam on the eyeball when you're doing 50, 60 faces. You got to you've got to keep that production line going. But sometimes I would look back and go, damn, I've done 5 of me, so I had to go back and change the nose, make it a bit more pointed or broader, or square up the jaw or whatever, or take the beard away. So but generally, because it is quite, it's not super realistic. It's when you zoom in on the detail, it's fairly loose, the painting. So if things had to be a lot more realistic, then I probably would have had more technical difficulties.
Right. Okay. Another question that we had was, did you work on the mural at night in Commissioner's House? And did you ever feel that Commissioner's House was haunted?
Oh yeah, many times I'd pull up in the pouring rain. There'd be like thunder and lightning. And there'd be nobody around, and I'd go in there and I'd be up on the scaffolding. I'd be painting away for a couple of hours, and I just kind of feel it was almost as if someone was watching me. And it was very strange when there wasn't like a thunderstorm, whatever. It's so quiet in there, you could almost hear a pin drop.
Mm-hmm.
And did go to a fortune teller once, and she told me I was psychically dead. I'd be the last person to ever notice a ghost. But even I managed to pick up on some vibes in that place. And I tell the story about when I was up on the scaffold, and there's like a corner, and there's a corridor in the back,
Mm-hmm.
and in that corridor there's an automatic door. And some nights that would just keep opening and closing by itself. You know, I was up on the scaffolding. I hear this kind of thing whir open, and I look down, and any minute expect some apparition to walk around the corner and stare up at me. You know, but it's a strange place. Yeah, it definitely got a vibe to it. But well, like as the fortune teller said, I'm not too tuned into those type of things. But I did pick up on some nights were kind of strange. Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, and then one final question that we had submitted was, I mean, it's a massive undertaking. It took you 3.5 years, all the research that you did. Would you ever do something like this again?
I had toyed with the idea of maybe doing City Hall, but that's
Okay.
2,000 square feet going up the stairs.
Oh my gosh.
And
Wow.
it would see me into my mid-50s. And just like, yeah, I'm not, yeah, I like doing smaller paintings. I'm not actually a muralist per se. I had the chance to do this painting, so I look upon it more as a massive painting rather than a mural.
Right.
But if you know, if the price is right, I mean, every artist likes steady income, right? Where yeah, so I would consider it if because like I said, there's different ways I would approach it now, and I'm maybe a little and there are so many aspects to Bermuda's incredible kind of multifaceted history that I could delve into, and I still have a list of things that I didn't manage to put into this mural that I'd love to put in. So no, I definitely consider it for sure.
Oh, awesome. Okay, cool. Lisa, did you have any other questions that you wanted to ask?
All I know is that now that I work at the museum, I get to spend more time with it, and I love it every time I get to go in there, and even better when I have to bring students in and we can have a Q&A about it. It's fascinating to see people's eyes light up, and it's across the age spectrum. And when adults are in there, when children are there, and we're chatting, I mean, it's really fun to watch and be engaged with visitors in particular. And yeah, it's a real source of inspiration for us to learn about our history and really ensure that make sure the story stays alive and gets into the classrooms at the youngest age possible and thread it all the way through.
Well, that's one
So
thing I really
thank you
like
so
is
much.
when the kids see it and get all fired up, you know, because there's a huge amount of text on Bermuda history and there's photos, but there isn't like this one place you can go and kind of
Exactly.
take away
Also,
that you like.
and the visual language, right, transcends all language barriers, right? So that everybody
Sure.
can understand
Point, yeah.
once they know where the starting point is. And I think that that's part of that power of art that we talked about at the beginning.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well put. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
I think that's a perfect place to end, the power of art. For anyone who wants to check it out, we do have the Hall of History is virtual now through that 360 panoramic. We hope you've enjoyed our first Keep Lounge chat, and hopefully we'll have many more of these. Guys, thank you so much for joining me for this chat. Stay safe, and
Thank you.
talk to you guys later.
Thank you, guys. That was a lot of fun. We'll do it again.